Okay, so today we're going to do something a little bit different. Rather than doing a draw over, I'm going to do a paint over. I'm pretty excited about this because it talks about color and value. I'm going to focus on just value today. So here's the image. The artist was complaining that the image looks a little flat, and I agree with them. Let's take a look at why. So I'm gonna get rid of all the color so that we can just focus on the values. What I notice is that this area right here is completely flat, and that is my theory as to why it looks flat. There are some technical issues here happening in the eyes that even though they were differentiated with color, like the eyelids, when you go to grayscale, you cannot see much of a difference in terms of how they're defining planes using values. So had I made were the eyelids darker or lighter than the eye socket, it would have helped contribute, it would have helped given a less flat feeling, a more rounded feeling. So let's get started on this. Um, Normally, I like things like this. This is a very graphic approach right here, and that makes it work as a painting instead of a photograph. But this flatness is ruined, in my opinion, by the solid definition of the borders here. For that to work, we need to we need to make it less defined, graphically speaking. So one thing we can do that just helps make it a better composition. Something like that. The other thing we can do is help give a little bit more definition to this part of the sleeve. So we have to assume this is the arm coming forward right here. That's her arm. That's going to take a little bit of drawing to do, and I can do that right here by using a smaller brush and figuring out the construction there. My guess is that it's something like that. That helps bring that arm forward. So let that be a that's a pretty good lesson actually. If you want your painting to be 3D, if you want your colors to be 3D, your drawing has to be 3D. So maybe something like that. Now that I have that, I'm able to go in and add values and colors to help sell that dimension. So one thing I could do is, let's see, get a new layer there. Another thing to keep in mind is gradients. Um, since it's darker at the top and lighter at the bottom, we want to continue that pattern here on the sleeve. So let's see how that would work. Maybe just get a little bit more light there. want to emphasize that shadow maybe. Maybe something like that. And again, this is just a very rough paint over. It's not meant to be a final. It's just to help correct some issues that have to do with flatness. Now I'm going ahead and putting back in the hair. Maybe something like that. It's a little bit too bright. What we have to pay attention to the light source. We have a light source coming like that, but also slightly from the front, as opposed to from the back or directly from the side. So anything that's facing this direction is going to be lit, and anything that's facing less in that direction is going to be less lit. So let's take a look at how light acts for a second. Let's imagine we're looking at a box straight on, and we have a light source dead center aiming right at it. So let me go ahead and draw a diagram for what I mean. Here's a plane or a box, and the light source is hitting it right there in that direction. What does that look like? Well, here's what it looks like if we were to light it with, say, a flashlight. Let's go here. That's what it would look like if we lit it with the flashlight. But if it was lit with the sun, it would look like plain white maybe. But that's again not true. It depends on the distance from the sun and the intensity of the sun. But the gradient would be less extreme than the original. There's still a gradient, but it's less extreme. And here's why. The further something is from a light source, the darker it is. And the more intense a light source, well, let's forget about that for a second. The darker something is from a light source, the further something is from a light source, the darker it is. So here we have the light source, but it's striking dead center. So even on a flat surface, you're going to have distances from that striking point. So you're going to have dark, less dark, less dark, and so forth until you reach white. Something like that. So that's how light acts. Now, when you start turning the surface, when you start changing planes, the difference gets even more extreme. So you might have something like that. And this might be the same value as that. But art is not about recreating reality. It's about interpreting reality and selling it in a way that's easy to understand. So I might just make that fully white, and that sells the idea of where the light is coming from. And that's clear. That's a clear statement. Now to make it a bit more realistic, I might add a few more gradients. Let's imagine, is this box floating in space in a complete void with no other sources of light? If so, it might be covered up like that. Is it a building in a night sky? If so, the building would be something like that, where the sky is darker than the building itself, this material itself. Let's say it's sitting against a white surface. So we have this giant plane behind it right there. Well, that's going to create a lot of reflected light. What about below here? Let's imagine there's another surface right there. So what we have with the light coming this way on a white surface is that light bounces back. So we would have this cast shadow here. But we would also have a little bit of reflect right there. And maybe just a little bit of gradient right there. And this would be just a little bit brighter. So that is maybe how light would affect that square in that space. But that's not the whole story. We would also have a little bit of gradient here. Maybe something like that. And that's a more realistic take on the box. You can practice this yourself by going into a dark room with take a box or a toy and a flashlight and aim a light at it from different directions and do that in different settings. Do that where you have do that in a bright room, do that in a dark room, do that in a medium colored room where you just have another light on at nighttime, and see and record that in order to see how light works in different situations. So that might look something like that. That might be a more realistic take on how light works around a surface. A ball, when doing a sphere, is just a more exaggerated version of a box. So instead of having one, two, three planes visible, you have a lot more planes visible. You have all these planes visible. And the smaller you divide it, the more blended or soft or smooth your shadows are going to be. But regardless of that, you're still shading in 3D. And the simpler you get it, the simpler your understanding of light, the more you simplify it, the more accurate you can get it. So this band of shadow is actually wrapping around the sphere on the other side as well. It's not something that exists only where you see it. Why is this important? Because we have to understand the shapes and how they work on this figure right here. Maybe something like that. And that's how you would light that ball coming from the same light source. So let's go ahead and get rid of that and go back to this. So now that I've got the hair is pointing at our light source. So that's why this part would be lit more than the rest of this. Also, because the hair is blocking this part of the sleeve, that would be just a little bit darker. Um, Basically, what happens is any plane or surface facing the light source would be more lit, and any plane facing away from the light source would be less lit. So let's see how that works here. Maybe something like that, but then you've got this cast shadow here. And then you've got this plane right here facing the light. Maybe something like that. Now we can go ahead and make room. Maybe something like that. What is this? Yeah, that weird line right there is not working for me. So let's go ahead and get rid of it. Maybe something like that would help it feel less flat. Um, Here what we have is a misunderstanding of shapes. So let's go ahead and fix that. And what we have here is this coming forward. So we want to actually feel that coming forward. That means the way the wrinkles wrap around the sleeve, around the arm, need to convey that. So it doesn't really matter what it looks like in real life. When creating something like this, you have to use the rules of life, but also make clear the direction and underlying construction and structure of your work. Um, so, like I said, this is coming forward towards us. We need to see and feel that it's actually coming forward. Maybe something. And exaggerate those contour lines, those wrinkles and folds. While keeping in mind the direction of the light source. So maybe something. Like that. And I would take this up. Maybe something like that. So let's go ahead and flip the image to make sure it still works. It's working. This one needs to be brought in just a little bit more. Sometimes it's just about changing the shape a little. one feels better. That's working better. Um, Problem is with this, so let's see if we can just block it in. So what I'm doing here is treating it as a bigger object rather than focusing on the cheek and the eyebrow and the eyeball. I'm treating it like the entire head right now to get the basic planes in. Once I have that, I can go back in and get things like the nose and the mouth and the eyelashes. But what matters is the overall structure of the head. And so when I paint, I try to nail those things in first. So that's feeling better. But again, remember what I said. The further something is from the light source, the darker it is. So this would have to be darker. What I also notice is the lack of symmetry in the head. So I can go ahead and fix that right now. So that helps make it more three-dimensional. And then it's just a matter of sculpting the shapes so that they work to whatever goal you're trying to get, whether it's realism or cartoony. But it helps to understand the planes of whatever you're drawing. So if I'm drawing a box, it helps to know what a box looks like. So I know that corners are not going to be rounded. I know the edges are not going to be rounded unless it's a rounded box. So something like that would help feel it less flat. Another way to do that is to get that part of the mouth right there. Maybe something like that. And now it comes to the mouth. So in general, lips are usually a darker tone than the rest of the face, especially when it has lipstick on. Um, so what I'm trying to accomplish here is that feeling of dimension and plane. And I'm just focusing on the big picture stuff. I'm not worried about the details right now. Go in and pick a little darker value there. And again, anything that's, the light's this way, so anything that's facing the light is going to be bright, and anything that's not facing the light is going to be darker depending on the degree it is turned away from the light. So this part of the lip can be a lot brighter. Right there. there's usually some bit of turn happening right here. Um, but again, the degree of that darkness is going to be the value of that. The value that I put here is going to depend on the degree it is turned away from the light. So if I use a fairly light value like that, I can give the impression of that little bit of meat under the jaw, between the jaw and the lip. So let's see here. Now it's time for the eyelids. Maybe something like that. Let's see what that looks and feels like. It feels a lot better to me. What about you? I'm still not happy with this. Get some anatomy in there, but without making it too strong, otherwise it makes her musculature look too defined. Maybe a little bit of core shadow there, so that we have some reflect going on here. Soften that edge right there. Like that. Also note some of the soft edges around the outside of the figure. That just helps make it a better composition, in my opinion. If everything is too defined, it ends up looking very unbelievable and unappealing, in my opinion. It ends up looking like a very sharp photograph. And when you take a look at photography, you'll notice that there are some parts that are in focus and some parts out of focus. In painting, even before the existence of photography, we did that. We softened some edges so that we could direct the eyes where they needed to go, to the center of interest. Maybe something like that. Anyway, I hope it was helpful. Um, and if you have any other drawings or paintings you'd like to see how it can be improved, let me know, and I'll be happy to take a look at that for you and go over it. Um, one more thing before I finish, because the light's coming from here. That would be one way of making it less flat. This might need to be a little bit darker here. Something like that. All right, that's pretty much it. I hope it helped. Thank you.